Hello everyone. Oh, I just finally finished sorting the Q&A list. Gargantuan list of doom here. It's relatively sorted and organized. I'm going to try and go through it as quickly as I can here, while still giving some time. Now, as in case anyone missed the announcement, from this point on, I am no longer answering repeat questions. I got quite a few this time. Any questions that I have answered before, either in a previous video or something, I'm not going to repeat. And I don't like doing that, to be completely honest, because I don't want to be like, oh, I expect you all to watch all 7 billion of my 13-hour reviews. But that's not actually the point. The point is that I simply don't have the time to keep up with this like I'd like to. I can't just do this constantly, and the Q&As are already taking up so much of my time, and like the last two and 3/4 hours, I just spent compiling this list and basically doing nothing else. And now I have to be in here today because I have to have a lot of backup reviews that I'm going to be running here in the background while I'm answering these. So I apologize for that as well. But anyways, point being, I'm going to go ahead and get through these. Another thing I just want to say really quick, I am trying out some more options with the podcast thing. It is possible I will not have to go through the giant hassle and rigmarole that I was thinking I would, which would be great. All I have to do, theoretically, assuming this works, is convert these videos and then host them on Blip. And Blip is supposedly automatically putting my stuff up on iTunes. I've already submitted the new podcast under iTunes and deleted the old one. It'll probably take a day or two for that to go into effect, but theoretically, by the time any of you see this tomorrow, that is to say Tuesday, it is probable that Arshay and Gaia will have a new podcast up on iTunes Store that you can pull up from Blip. Now, those are going to be videos, but they are nonetheless going to be things that, fairly low size and quality, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue that you can just pop it on the iPod there and whatnot. And yeah, hopefully that'll work. Alright, so first category here. Let's go ahead and turn off word wrap so I can actually read this. Oh my goodness, okay. First question, what do you think about CD Projekt and their strategy to listen to fans and give out free stuff? By the way, I'm sorry, I meant to say this previously. A quick thing, I do summarize a lot of these questions down a lot. Most of that is so that it doesn't take too much character space, and part of it is because the original questions are not always written in a way that the question itself is very obvious. Like, I'll get a question that says, I think this and this and that. What do you think of this? How do I think of this? What do I think of this? And I'll shorten that down to, what do you think of this and this? And I'll try and discuss what you were talking about during the question. So, in that vein, this gentleman was talking about how CD Projekt has a very good consumer strategy, theoretically speaking, for maintaining good consumer base and making sure that they have a lot of loyalty amongst their fans. However, is it viable to do that from a corporate perspective, from a monetary perspective? And the answer is actually yes, sometimes. The catch is, if you can think of a graph here, you basically want to hit right about this point right here, where you are still, you're still charging, you're still making money. You're not making a lot of money, you're not making as money as you could, but you're still making money, still making a profit, still walking home with money every night. But at the same time, you're giving as much away free as you can, and you're spending as much of that money, that the gross that you're making, back on customer service and improving their games and listening to the fans and giving them what they want, that sort of thing. So, yes, that is a very viable strategy. The catch, as it always is with something like that, is it has to be done very well and it has to be done very carefully. It is not the sort of thing you should just be like, oh, let's just do that. If you'll forgive me for segueing for just a moment, there was a game back on the SNES called Aerobiz, which was an airplane management corporation kind of game thing. I don't know what to call that. And that kind of thing will work in a fictional setting as well, in games that are set up properly like that, because you can just, bilk the heck out of the customers and make tons of money off of them, but at the same time, it is much more profitable long term to go ahead and build up the loyalty and actually have an increased amount of customers by taking care of them and blah blah blah. But again, not going too far, because if you do what I naturally did when I first picked up that game and just like, yes, best everything, best seats, best comfort, best food, I just hemorrhaged money left and right until it was gone. So anyways, I'm sorry, let's move on to the next question. Have you ever thought about working for a magazine like The Escapist or Game Informer? This is an extended question. I have indeed thought about this. Now, let's be completely honest with ourselves. Being a game reviewer that professionally is not actually a dream job in any way, shape, or form, as any major reviewer will tell you, ignoring the fact that if you're working for someone like IGN, which I would never do, by the way, the link between your score and the rating and how much money you make, that kind of thing, all of that. There's just a whole lot of background politics and money that goes on behind that I don't want to deal with. On top of that, even if we somehow got that out the window, even if I was allowed to pick the games I reviewed, for example, and continue doing these long reviews, which I doubt any site would ever want me to do, even if I was allowed to do that, we have another problem, and that is the fact that I don't... It's a very fine line here. I don't want to do something I love to do for the money, because all that does is turn it into another job. What I want is to have the money to do what I want to do that I love, if you follow me here. And those are essentially saying the same thing in just different terms. Because the point is, if I did have a job, if I was employed in order to do these reviews like this, for example, as this has come up several times recently, if this made enough money that I could live off of, that'd be great. But I don't want it to turn into a job where the only reason I'm doing this is for the money. The money is essentially inconsequential. It's something I have to deal with. It's something I have to have in order to have the freedom to, buy dinner every day, pay for things for other people, give gifts away, take care of the house, deal with bills and all that irritant, mundane realities. And so, as much as I don't want to deal with money, I sort of have to if I want to keep enjoying the things that I actually do enjoy in life. So it's kind of a yes or no. It would depend on the circumstances and the specifics and the contract and all that sort of stuff. And I know legalese, so I can read a contract quite well. But I sincerely doubt that's ever going to happen, to be completely honest with you. Have I ever played the Arma franchise and/or DayZ, and should developers be more open to modders? I should be taking notes as I go here. Oh well. That was 06. No, I have not played those series. I have been watching it somewhat. I haven't been a big fan of the series. But I'll tell you one thing I do agree with firmly, and that's not only the fact that the mod breathed new life into it, but also that was something the developers supported. That was something that they were like, yes, go. And I have always been a huge fan of developers who are supportive of mods. For example, Bethesda, who have been supportive of mods at the very bare minimum since Morrowind, and have been fully on board with that. And I've only gotten more on board with that. The Steam Workshop comes to mind. Speaking of Steam, the next one I could list as a company that's very on board with mods is Valve. And another one I could point out there would be Blizzard. All three of these companies have been fairly supportive of mods and custom maps and all that sort of thing, the whole modding community. And I'm fully in favor of that. I love that, and I think more companies should do that, in my opinion, because, number one, not only do you get additional custom content, but you're reaching out to a larger base. So while you're going to get a lot of things that aren't good, as indeed there are many mods and many custom maps and many, whatevers that are not good, what you are going to get is a larger sample selection. So while you have to sift, Little Big Planet is a wonderful example of what I'm talking about here. Little Big Planet, there are tons of terrible levels and horrible levels and just, what is this? But there are enough really good, really imaginative, really creative levels in that by themselves those justify that feature. And that's true across the board. There are enough really good mods for WoW or for, maps for StarCraft 2 or StarCraft for that matter, or maps for Warcraft 3 while we're on the subject. There are plenty of awesome mods for Oblivion or Skyrim, or Morrowind, or Fallout New Vegas. And of course, there are plenty of amazing maps that you can enjoy for Portal 2. So, yes, I'm in favor of mods, and I probably talked about that entirely too long. I should keep these a little shorter, shouldn't I? Next question. Now, this one made me laugh here. If you'll give me just a moment here. Someone asked about E3, the Year of the Bow, and My Body is Ready. Now, I don't know if I've ever gotten this point across, but I don't actually follow internet memes or news or Twitters or Facebooks or anything like that. That whole side of the internet is something I've never done. When I go to the internet, I'm doing it because I'm playing a game or because I need to learn something right now, either for work or for my own personal interest. I've never been an internet browser. I've never been a denizen of the internet. It's never been my thing. And as time goes on, I'm starting to think more and more that that's a good thing, but for reasons I don't feel like getting into. My point is that I had to go look this up. I had no idea what this gentleman was talking about. Year of the Bow? What? My Body is Ready? What? And apparently My Body is Ready has to do with some mistranslation issues and a meme, and I'm just going to wave that away. I got nothing on that. As far as Year of the Bow, apparently that has to do with the fact that a lot of games featured archery combat this year, which is interesting, I suppose. I don't think that was intentional, and I don't think that there's anything really specific that I could add to that, other than the fact that I do like archery. I've actually I don't know what to actually call it. I am an archer in real life. Let's put it that way. I know how to use a bow. I know how to use a bow very well. I'm actually a very good shot, and I find that enjoyable. I love ballistics and parabolic arcs and all that sort of thing, and so I like it when a game pulls it off properly. But shrug. Now let's go ahead and go to the next section. Where are we at? 10 minutes. Let's go ahead and try and finish up the Mass Effect section here, because I got a whole series of questions just for Mass Effect here. Let's see. If they released a complete edition of Mass Effect 1 through 3 that had new branches of story that gave you more choices and carried those choices all through all three games, would you buy it? Now, this is another one of those questions I had to shorten down a lot, but this is an interesting concept. Now, I personally don't think I would. Probably because I already own Mass Effect 1 through 3 plus all the DLCs, or rather, 1 to 2 DLCs and then 3. And rebuying the game just because they added a little bit more content is not something that I would be particularly interested in personally. But I do want to add that I would support it if they did something like that, and I would actually encourage people who have not gotten into the series or who have the money to spare, for example, to pick that up, because that's an interesting idea and I love that, and that would be kind of cool, and especially breathe new life into a series that, let's be honest, has not been doing well this year. Let's see. What class did you pick in Mass Effect 3? I picked a soldier, personally, for my Shepard, and the reason I picked a shoulder... I picked a shoulder class, it kind of runs up and bumps people. No. I picked a soldier class, because of course it made more sense to me. It made more sense for a Shepard to be a military, I use guns and I'm very well trained kind of individual. But also because that sort of gameplay appeals to me more personally. Granted, this isn't a direct correlation, but in gaming in general, I tend to play one of two types of individuals. The tank, or the healer. Now, and a lot of emphasis on the tank, by the way. Every major character I've had in every MMO ever has been a tank. All my mains are tanks. All my secondaries tend to be healers. But the point being, even in a game like Mass Effect, the idea of being the front runner who's taking the attention, taking the hits, and basically distracting the enemy, flanking the enemy, moving around, while your squad does the actual crowd control, disruption, and damage in the background, made a lot of sense to me and appealed to me personally. So that would be why I went ahead and did that. Let's see here. Do you believe, if the Mass Effect franchise is to continue, that Bioware will completely remove the RPG aspect of the franchise and turn it into a full Gears of War clone series to further the series? No, I don't. Or rather, yes, I do, and no, I don't. I do think that the Mass Effect franchise is going to continue. I sincerely doubt that EA is going to allow them to let that cash cow go anywhere. However, I don't think they're going to go the full Gears of War route, personally. However, I should take that back. I was going to say because it would be a bad move, but by the same token, it is worth noting that the kinds of decision EA tends to hand down to its developers would be that type of thing. So I could fully see a full-on third-person shooter game of Mass Effect that takes away all the levels, all the conversation wheels, all that, and just makes it a shooter with cutscenes. I could see that. Whether or not that would be good or not would depend on the individual game. I'm not going to comment on something that is purely theoretical at this point, but shrug, as they say. We'll see. But that is unfortunately or otherwise a very definite possibility. Could you see EA or Bioware releasing a second DLC for the ending if and when the extended DLC fails to fix anything? Now, this question can be taken one of two ways. One, will they try for a second fix on the ending? Or two, will they do more DLCs after the ending? As to the first interpretation, no, I don't think they're even going to bother. In fact, I think it is a little bit astonishing that they are bothering with the extended cut at all. And I mean that sincerely. I did not expect this, especially from a corporate perspective, if I'm honest. As to the second question, whether or not they will continue to do DLCs after the extended cut that will be paid, yes, absolutely. I have no doubt whatsoever that they're going to try and push more money DLCs out as the game continues and as they try to get more money out of it. Now, with the way it's going lately, it is very possible and indeed probable that those are going to be all multiplayer focused. Whether that's good or bad is up to the individual. I will freely admit that there are only two reasons Mass Effect 3 is even installed in my computer at this point, and one of those reasons is I still play the multiplayer every now and again. because, let's be honest, it is actually a bit fun, and I do enjoy playing it with my friends. Shrug, I suppose. But I'm not going to get into that whole debate right now. Next question. Why in Mass Effect 3 do you think they went with the pure evil route with Renegade Shepard? I don't think, I personally think the Renegade Shepard is pure evil, but I know exactly what you're talking about, and I personally think it's a very bad idea. I don't know why they did that, or rather, I know exactly why they did that. Too many people, how do I put this? There is a market for being an evil, manipulative, cruel bastard in video games. There just is. There's no escaping that. There's no denying that. And I'm not actually saying there's anything wrong with that. Let's be clear here. But the reason I think this was a bad case in this specific instance was Mass Effect as a whole has always been about choices, has always been about... okay, let me take that back a bit. Has always been about not being good versus evil, but being Paragon versus Renegade. That was the whole reason it was Paragon versus Renegade. It was a matter of opinion, a matter of preference. Renegade Shepard was still a good guy, but not in Mass Effect 3. And some of the things he does in Mass Effect 3, or she does in Mass Effect 3, are just kind of abominable, if you'll forgive me for saying so flatly. I didn't even know most of these existed until people started talking about it, and I started looking them up on YouTube, and I was just like, oh my god, killing Morden. I can't even envision that. Never even entered my mind as a possibility. I just, wow. Deceiving Morden struck me as a thing that I could at least see as a renegade. Shooting Morden? No. And it is my opinion that is a bad thing, especially because it takes it's a stutter. It takes what I consider to be the biggest flaw about Mass Effect 3 as a whole and exemplifies it within a single point, and that is the fact that it is much more darker and edgier in the wrong way, because it is possible to do that correctly, but they didn't. And it emphasizes the fact that you are no longer a hero. You are someone who is trying to struggle. You are trying to survive. You are trying to make do with what you can, and the ends justify the means. Even if you're Paragon, that's true. And I don't like that personally. Not in this series. I get that as a point. I get that in some series. But in my opinion, the thread that had been going through 1 and 2 was that you could succeed regardless of the odds. You could manage to stay true to your principles and still manage to come out ahead if you did it right. If it was difficult, but it was possible. In Mass Effect 3, they removed that possible, and they removed the difficult from it. They just made it no. You have to either be good, and you fail in many cases, or you have to accept that the ends justify the means. And that Morden thing is a perfect example. We need the support from the Solarians, so I'm willing to kill Morden in cold blood with the gun he gave me. I'm sorry if I sound like I'm ranting on this, but I do personally think that was a terrible idea. And I suppose I haven't answered the original question. Why did they do it? To appeal to a greater audience. I did sort of mention that, but my point is, they felt that having it be good versus evil would be more safe. As I've said, EA tends to force their developers to make safe choices. And it is more of a safe choice to go with good versus evil, light side versus dark side, whatever you want to call that, than Paragon versus Renegade. I apologize for that lengthy answer here. Let's see. What would you think of a Mass Effect movie set during the First Contact War? I'm only going to answer this briefly, but that would be awesome if done properly. It would have to be from the perspective of... I don't know actually, but Anderson would have to be in it, in my opinion, if I'm remembering correctly, because I do believe Anderson was present in the First Contact War. I could be wrong about that. And I do think it would be interesting. I don't know if I would do a whole movie on that. What I would do is a purchasable or downloadable video, like what Dragon Age is doing with the Cassandra story. Something like that, rather than a full-blown to-theaters movie. But that's just my opinion. Let's see. Do you consider Mass Effect to be an RPG? Now, this is another one of those extended questions. And this is related to another question I will answer later. But in short, yes. By either definition of an RPG, and I'll go into that later, I do think Mass Effect does qualify as an RPG. Or rather, I should say, to use my own terms, I do think it qualifies as a role-playing game, and I do think it qualifies as an RPG in both sense. And I will argue that stringently, if need be. Oh my goodness. Okay, let me update this. Okay. Do you think the indoctrination theory could segue into the original ending? Yes, I do. As I've talked about the indoctrination theory at length and my personal thoughts about it. And I do think that if they wanted to, they could use the theories put forth in that and flesh it out into the extended cut in order to pave way to returning to the original ending with the dark energy crisis rather than the singularity difficulty. So, technological singularity. So that's just my opinion, but I do think that could work. I don't think that's going to happen, of course, but as a vacuous idea, or rather as an idea in a vacuum, I think it would be interesting. This is a long one. I'm going to go ahead and read it as is, and then I'll chop it down later. Do you think Bioware was being dishonest or misleading about what to expect from Mass Effect 3 during the pre-release, saying things such as the Rachni will have a huge impact, we won't pull a Lost, and leave you with more questions than answers, it won't end with a choice of A, B, or C, it won't be magic in space. There were several other things they were saying, including the fact that your choices would have a much more impact because it's the third game in the trilogy, doesn't have to consider carrying forward, so they can actually have your results actually branch differently. They were talking about how you could actually lose and have a bad ending, where the Reapers win, all that kind of thing? Or do I think the argument that they were being dishonest there is valid, invalid, or just another technically? Technically. He actually spelled it out. It was awesome. I personally think that if we were to confront anybody at BioWare about this issue, what they would say is, technically, we did do all that, and I would then smack them in the face, and then punch them, and then just kind of start beating them up for a while. It's very cathartic. You should do it sometime. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that. But in all seriousness, I don't think that... I think that all that pre-release hype was just that hype. It was all build-up. All I gotta say about that is Fable. Anyone remember Fable? Morrowind killer. Yeah, right. So it was just build up with fluff. It was marketing hype. It was jump. And granted, I believed them. Everybody I knew believed them. We had no reason not to believe them. As I've talked about this topic at length, that's why this was a betrayal, was because we had no reason not to believe them. And then, oh, I'm sorry, no, we're just giving you Mass Effect 3 rather than what you want. Ugh, whatever. Okay, that's the end of the Mass Effect section. Let's go ahead and hit the gameplay sections. I'm only 20 minutes in here, so let's see here. Next question. Or rather, first gameplay question. Do you think a modern Sonic the Hedgehog game could be spoken properly by you while you're saying this? Sonic the Hedgehog... Oh my gosh! Sonic the Hedgehog game could be great if they matured it a little. Oh my god. I can't speak tonight, can I? If they had mature themes, a grown-up setting, that kind of thing. Now... Yes, I do. I think that would be very possible in more than one way. All I have to say about that is Paper Mario 2, which, despite being a 2D Paper Mario, nonetheless had a lot of very mature themes in it. The setting itself was very well developed and very grown up. The RPG style was fantastic and flowed beautifully, and the gameplay was still enjoyable, which is very important. I do think that would be very possible, and I would probably buy the unholy hell out of that game because that sounds really cool. Next question here. Do you think Fallout 4 should use Skyrim's game engine? Honestly, I don't have a lot to say about this one, so yes, I do think they should use it, or at least theoretically. Depends on where they go with Fallout 4. If it's going to be an MMO, no. But if they're going to do Fallout 4 properly, yeah, that'd be awesome. What is my opinion on the newest browser-based Command & Conquer? Hang on. Oh, God. Okay, sorry, that's my opinion of the new browser-based Command & Conquer. I'm sorry, I don't like to be derisive on these things, but I have absolutely nothing good to say about that game. And that's all I'm going to say on it. Moving on. What do I think about a game called Revelations 2012? Excuse me. I had to look this one up. That's another... I wouldn't say it's a first because that happened last Q&A. Revelations 2012, how do I put this nicely? Looks terrible. Looks like it plays terrible. The concept is disinteresting. The combat is just abysmal. I'm not just talking about graphics. The game itself looks awful. And it looks a lot like someone took Quake 2, modified it, with a lot of fake enthusiasm. And I think that's about all I can say without getting into unkind territory, or rather more unkind territory, so let's move on. Do you remember when Age of Empires came in a Nutrigrain cereal box? Yes, I do. as actually, that's not how I was introduced to Age of Empires. That is how I introduced a friend of mine to Age of Empires. I was like, hey, and he was like, hey, what? That's just, oh wow. I feel old sometimes. Did I accept Morrigan's offer at the end of Dragon Age, and did I perform the ritual? Yes, I did, and yes, I did. The reasons being because, as I've said before, that's one of the two romance options I've ever taken ever. The other one being Bashtalover and KOTOR. And for essentially the same reason. Had nothing to do with any attractiveness or Claudia Black, who was a good voice actress, let's be honest. But nothing to do with that. It was because of the fact that I felt that was the natural development of the characters. It made perfect sense for me for the Warden and Morrigan, two extremely injured, broken individuals, no matter which origins you pick, who have gone through hell and back together to end up close and actually becoming very close friends, lovers, and then the step past that. And then one of the things I liked about that was the fact that Morrigan, of all the people you could romance, was the one who you could sleep with her first, and then you had to keep going and actually get her to open up and actually get her to admit that she has actual feelings for you and really is in love with you rather than simply, is your bedmate or whatever. And get her out of that whole Darwinism mentality thing that she had going on. So, yes, I did, or rather my character, I should say, did take the offer, and yes, my character did perform the ritual, which is one of the reasons I'm really hoping that comes back in Dragon Age 3. Next question. Whoops. That's not the question. How much... Okay, this is an interesting question. I'm going to take a little bit of time here. How much time do you devote to games? Like, what is a responsible amount of time to play a game so that it does not interfere with real life? Now, this is another one of those ones I shrunk down. This is a very good question. As I've said many times, all things in moderation. That applies across the board. And video games are no exception to that. While I've been playing video games since I was 3, I still believe firmly in the concept of video games with moderation. Don't play it for too long. Don't play it too much. Don't get too much into it. There's a line. Now, where this line is depends on the individual. And this is important. It depends on you, how much you can take mentally, emotionally, physically, and it depends on what your responsibilities are in real life. For example, I have a full-time job and people to take care of and all that fun stuff, and these videos to do. And so I have to very much part and parcel my game time out in what amounts to hour or 2 hour chunks throughout the week. But even if I was able to collect that all together, this is the other side of the argument. If I was to able to say play Final Fantasy XII, which I've been replaying recently, in one giant chunk, right here, in I think about 10 hours. That's about how much game time I get in the week, something like that. I think it's a little bit more than that. But let's just use 10 hours as an example. If I just woke up one day, started playing FF12, and then went to bed at the end of that day, that would still work as long as everything was dealt with. All the bills were paid. I still took care of myself. Personal hygiene, actually eating right, exercises. I exercise daily because the same reason I eat and breathe. It's just taking care of myself. It just, as long as I kept up on the basics and as long as I didn't neglect anyone or anything for doing that, that would still be fine. So it's not per se about what is a reasonable amount of time. It's about what is a reasonable amount of time while staying responsible, basically, while being an adult about things, and while keeping in mind the fact that you do still have things to take care of and not neglecting anyone. For example, if you are playing video games a lot and you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and I've seen this happen in both cases, myself and others, and that person is someone who is actually needy. This is important. That person actually is overly needy. That person actually insists on spending every moment with you. And they get upset that you're spending too much time playing video games when you play, say, 2 hours a day. That is something you want to sit down and talk with them about. Now, if that person is not needy, not excessive, and actually is wanting to spend time with you separately and thinks that 2 hours is too much, then you sit down and you explain, well, this is something that I care about and enjoy. Maybe we can work something out. Maybe we could start playing together. Maybe, and if she has no interest, then compromise. So, I guess what I'm saying is it depends. I hate to say that, but it really does. This is the honest to God truth. It depends. Use your brain and think about the situation, and remember that video games, while they are a reason to enjoy life, they are a thing you can enjoy in life, they cannot supersede the things you need to do in order to continue living. Just my opinion. Now, next question. Where are we? Can you please explain why it is you prefer the recent Mario Karts, despite or indeed regards to the increase in artificial difficulty? This is another one of those complicated ones. Oh shoot! If you'll give me just a moment here. It's complicated because, of course, naturally, I do play multiplayer quite a bit. I enjoy multiplayer quite a bit, and I've been played. Whoops. Uh, I've played. Why is that in use? With my friends here locally a lot, and in fact, really wish that a couple of my friends who are online, who I've been friends with for many years, were closer, because then I would play with them, you know? Okay, 1, 2. If you'll give me just a moment, I apologize. 6 is next. There we go. So I do enjoy the multiplayer aspect, and I think it is better in recent generations than it has been in previous, without question or hesitation. That being said, the recent Mario Karts have been enjoyable except for the artificial increase in difficulty. And for those of you who don't know what I mean, real increase in difficulty and artificial difficulty. You know what? I don't want to get into that. That's actually a very long discussion. Recent Mario games have had artificial difficulty, not real difficulty. The end, with regards to the AI and the single-player campaigns and the maps and all that. So I think that's a bad thing. Let's just get that out there. I do think that's a bad thing. What I will also say on top of that is the fact that it hasn't bothered me that much, except for a few rare instances. I don't know how to explain that properly, except for the fact that I don't... I mean, I have been frustrated, but every time I am, I just put the game down for a bit. And when I come back to it, the random number generator will come up again, and I'll be fine. So... That being said, I do enjoy the mechanics. I do enjoy the additional options that they've added in the recent Mario Karts. You know, I'd really enjoyed the motorbiking, for example, in Wii. I really enjoyed all of the additional maps that they added to the 3DS version and the gliding thing, you know. I like that. I enjoy that. And so while the artificial difficulty is irritating and frustrating, it isn't sufficiently so in order to take away my enjoyment of these games. I still think the GameCube version was the best, but that's just me. Alright, next question. Where are we here? This is another long one. Would you buy an open-world console release of Pokemon? What this is referring to is a thing that's been going around a lot lately, is the thought of making a Pokemon game that is essentially in the style of Elder Scrolls, Fallout, something like that. An open, sprawling world set in the world of Pokemon, and the end. You know, you don't even have to describe anything past that. Yes, I would buy the hell out of that. I would love that game, especially if it was done right. Having the ability to actually roam and explore and actually... you know, find where the various Pokemons are resting, nesting, and catching them, and actually traveling from town to town and seeing people in the wild and going through the grass, all that, just exploring the world. And I've always been a big fan of Pokemon, if that's not obvious. And I think that would be very enjoyable, and I would definitely buy that, especially if it was excellent or good, or at least passable, you know, one of the two. Something like that. I apologize, I am kind of scatterbrained tonight. I have not been getting a lot of good sleep tonight. And by tonight, I mean last night, which I guess makes my point, doesn't it? Let's move on. Next question. Do you believe an RPG is a personal story where you roleplay or something with levels and inventory? This is another squished question, and this is the one I was referencing earlier. Personally, I do think that both have a valid claim at being an RPG in modern market, because a role-playing game isn't what an RPG is these days. The term RPG has effectively become its own term. What we refer to as an RPG means nowadays levels, experience, inventory, that kind of thing, you know, equipment, in some combination thereof. And an RPG, therefore, is something that can be applied to any other genre or format very easily. That being said, I do still think that some games are role-playing games where you actually, you know, role-play. All of the Elder Scrolls and the the Fallouts are excellent examples of that. Technically, Mass Effect can be as well. As I was saying, you could make an argument for Mass Effect 1 and 2 being role-playing games, because you are still role-playing, you still have choices, you still have options, you still can direct your character in one way or another. Now, it's not a complete and total freedom, but it never is in video games, so I think that's getting into semantics, personally. Bottom line, I do believe that there's both, and generally I try to refer to them as either role-playing games or RPGs. Or both, in some cases, or indeed most cases. Next question here. What are your thoughts on... This is another extended one. What are your thoughts on Infernal difficulty in Diablo 3? Recently, I was able to push through Diablo 3, due to being able to do that while doing my job at the same time, which is much easier to do than doing this at the same time, in case you're wondering. And I have gotten up to Act 2 in Diablo 3 Inferno difficulty. Now, I've been following the whole Diablo 3... How do I put this nicely? People whine too much thing for ever since before Diablo 3 came out. You know, people were complaining about D3 when they first saw the first screenshots of it, and I was just... And I've talked about this already over my beta. I am automatically, I admit this, I am not completely impartial. I am automatically inclined to defend Blizzard just because the opposition are such twats for the most part. Now, I'm not... Anyone in this audience who has a genuine grievance against D3, that's fine. But what I'm speaking to is the people who do not know how to type or talk or iterate or anything. These people just rant and whine and scream and moan and complain about the stupidest of things, too. My goodness, I've seen the stupidest complaints about D3. That being said, I do have no problem whatsoever with Inferno difficulty as is. And I mean that sincerely. I think Inferno difficulty is very difficult. I don't think it's impossible. I do think that if you're very careful, take your time, be patient, kite a lot, and have plenty of gear, and a good, decent income, you will be able to do Inferno difficulty. I think that is perfectly fine, especially since they made it the 4th difficulty. It is optional content. It is something you do not have to see in order to see all of the story. It is not something you have to conquer, any more than you have to do the heroic achievements in WoW, for example, to use another Blizzard content thing here. You don't have to do that. That is something that people who like the challenge can do. Now, I've heard people be like, oh, it's impossible, oh, it's a gear trick. No, you're wrong. I'm sorry. Now, granted, I've only been through Act 2, but I happen to know someone who is in Act 4 who is doing fine. On a barbarian, by the way, just to really get the point across there. So, and I've seen his build, and it's the same exact build I came up with for my barbarian, too, so shrug. Bottom line here, it doesn't bother me that Inferno difficulty is very difficult and that they completed it, you know, they released it untested, per se. Not only for the fact that it's the optional super difficult content that it should be, and the fact that you can still get to 60, get to the end game, and enjoy the game without having to do this ultra hard stuff, because hell difficulty, let's be honest, is not that hard, as long as you're even paying any kind of attention at all. But, and I mean, when I was playing through just this weekend, we just blew through hell difficulty. It took, like, hardly any time at all. It was just mulch, mulch, mulch. It was fun, it was fun. When we finally got to Inferno, we split up in order to go and see how we would do it solo. Of course, they fixed that problem now, I notice. But, I'm sorry, I'm derailing a bit. The second reason I have no problem with Infernal difficulty is that, and more importantly, the reason... The question was phrased such that, why do you think they released it untested? You know, why do you think they admitted, you know, this is something that we tested, and then we increased the difficulty after testing it for Inferno? Blizzard, traditionally speaking, historically speaking, has had a trend of coming out with difficult content that is actually difficult, and that people then complain is too easy. And that has been a trend for many, many years. I do not blame Blizzard for putting out something that is actually difficult and then making it more difficult on top of that, just because that's been the trend for the last several years. I would probably do the exact same thing in their boat. Now, I hate to be defending Blizzard, but and in all honesty, I'm going to bash the heck out of Blizzard in my very next question, so I guess it's not a problem. But, I'm not going to bash them, but, you know, next question is a more negative one. I'm sorry, I could talk about this for a while, but my mind's starting to roam a bit. I am just too tired, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here. I have no problems with Inferno difficulty. Moving along. Next question. Where are we at here? Do you intend to use the real money auction house, buy, sell, trade, and what do you think of it? This is one of those multi-questions that I was asked several times, and I believe I've answered this already, sort of, but I'm going to go ahead and answer this one last time. I think the real money auction house is a bad idea overall. There are some benefits you could say to it. There are. I admit that. There are some possibilities for it. I don't think it's a... I think it has some very long-term problem potential for the economy, for the Diablo 3 economy, which has already been fluctuating all over the place. And I think that too many people have dreams of, you know, living off of Diablo 3 and getting rich, which isn't going to happen. Now, that being said, I will go ahead and defend the real money auction house in the sense that in about 5 months, 6 months, something like that, it's going to become a lot more viable as the market does this, and what's going to happen is it's going to slowly balance out. This is what happens in general in games, especially in MMOs. It's still going to be fluctuating, but the fluctuation is going to be like this instead. And once it gets to this point, it'll be fine. Now, am I ever going to use the real money auction house? No. I have no interest and no intention to buy gear or buy winning. You know, I've always said I have no problem with paying money for content and for cosmetic things. I will not pay to win. This is not what I do. I don't agree with this, and I never have, and I never will. I just don't get into that. So, not going to use it. I'm not going to use it to sell either. I sincerely doubt I would make any decent money off it at all, and frankly, I don't care about going through the hassle. But I guess that's the end of that. I'm sorry, well, there is one more. One more Diablo 3 question here. Do you use Gold Find or Magic Find? I actually use both, which I suppose is kind of cheating. But no, in all seriousness, I do use both. My Make Money suit is both. It is as much Money Find and as much Gold Find as I can put on every single piece of gear that I can. And I just run around Inferno with someone else killing. And, get the full 5 stacks of whatever it's called, Nephilim's Valor, I believe. And loot just comes flying out. The gold comes out in quad digits at the bare minimum, and we get blues and yellows left and right, and the gold just kind of flows in, which is very nice and very useful, especially given how expensive crafting is. Oh my goodness. But that's kind of expected and not something I really have any problems with, to be completely honest with you. Now, do I think an RPG of the Star Trek universe could be done? And if so, what era would you rather have them look at? Now, this is kind of a tough one, because there are several different formats an RPG could take, and it would be very difficult to pull off. But what I will say is, yes, provisionally, I think a Star Trek RPG done in the Earth and Beyond format, where you're not playing the captain or the crew member or whatever, you're playing the ship, where your avatar, your character in the game is actually your ship, and you upgrade your ship or replace it with another ship entirely, and level up your crew, basically get them better. That would work beautifully, and I would love that. And I know what some of you are thinking. They already did that with Star Trek Online. Yes, they did. That, but a single-player RPG, please. Next point is what era would I set it in? That's very difficult, but I would rather it be set in one of the more recent eras. Oh my goodness, I have a customer. Well, that's inconvenient. I was just about to pause anyways. To finish my answer, I think the most appealing era to do a Star Trek RPG in would be something recent, would be something modern. The TNG era, for example, would be nice and interesting, but would probably involve more exploration. What I would love more is something a lot more recent, say during DS9's era of the Dominion Wars, or post-DS9 era, in the area that hasn't been covered yet, basically. So, I'm going to go ahead and pause here, and start the next video.